My brother shattered my nose. My parents called me dramatic. So I turned my trauma into evidence. And now they're under investigation. It happened on Thanksgiving, which is already loaded with all the pressure and expectations that family gatherings bring. The dining room was warm with the smell of roasted turkey and something too sweet, candied yams maybe, or that pie my mother always overbakes. I was sitting at the edge of the table, nursing a second glass of wine that I didn't even want, just something to hold so I wouldn't have to gesture too much when I spoke. I had only opened my mouth because the silence between bites was thick and waiting to be cut. I brought it up, the will, the house, what would happen to the land after they were gone. Not because I wanted anything, but because it always felt like the kind of thing we should have discussed before the world turned upside down and decisions had to be made in panic. I thought I was being reasonable. My brother Louis didn't agree. He said nothing at first, just stared, then snorted, and when I kept talking, calmly, trying to stay calm, he stood up. Everyone was watching. The forks froze midair. Then he walked over, muttering something low that I couldn't catch, and suddenly shoved me, hard, into the refrigerator behind me. My back smacked the metal. The cold handle jammed into my ribs. Before I could even process that, his knee came up and slammed into my nose. The sound it made, like wet cloth tearing or a crunch underfoot in winter, that noise lives in my bones now. I went down, blood rushing from my face, my hands scrambling against the kitchen tile for something, anything to hold on to. I remember my legs shaking, my breath coming in short bursts, the room spinning. Someone knocked over a glass. I tried to reach for my phone. That stupid instinct. Call for help, even when help is right there and doing nothing. My mother, her face a tight mask of horror that shifted too quickly into something else, grabbed the phone right out of my hand. Just took it. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was firm. My father, still seated at the head of the table like this was all some awkward toast gone wrong, just muttered, "Drama queen," without looking up. That was the part that broke me, not the violence, the silence that followed it. No one moved. No one helped me up. No one said his name. I lay there on the kitchen floor, blood pooling into the cuff of my jeans, feeling everything constrict. My chest, my vision, my understanding of what family even meant. It all shrank down into a pinpoint, pain, shame, and the humming sound of the refrigerator next to me. They always told me I was being dramatic, too sensitive, making things up. It was like a script my family never got tired of reciting, one they handed down to each other like some twisted heirloom. The worst part? After a while, I started believing it. That maybe the door didn't actually lock from the outside. That maybe the stairs weren't that steep. That maybe I was just bad at handling things the way normal people do. Too raw, too reactive, too much. I was 8 the first time it really sank in. I don't even remember what I said that triggered it. Something about a missing toy, maybe a tantrum I don't even recognize myself in now. But I remember the closet door closing. I remember the thick dark swallowing everything and the sound of my brother's feet walking away down the hall. I screamed, at first, pounded on the door, but that faded into quiet pretty quickly. You learn fast that no one's coming. And when my mother finally opened it, hours later, the first thing out of her mouth wasn't "Are you okay?" It was, "Stop crying, you're fine." I wasn't fine. I didn't even know what that word meant anymore. At 13, it was the stairs. We were fighting. I said something, probably pushed too far, like always, and he shoved me. Not with full force, not with both hands, just enough. Just enough for me to lose balance, for my shoulder to hit the wall, for my leg to twist under me on the landing. I remember lying there with my breath caught in my throat and the shock wearing off too slowly. But when I told them what happened, it was, "You must have tripped. And don't blame your brother for your clumsiness." Even when my knee swelled like a grapefruit, even when the bruises bloomed in shapes that looked suspiciously like fingers, the story had already been decided, and I wasn't the one telling it. By 17, I thought maybe if I played by their rules, they'd stop rewriting my pain. I got the grades. I stayed out of trouble. I did everything right. Until I didn't. Until I got into a college they didn't approve of, too liberal, too far, too not what they had envisioned. That's when the words turned sharp, cold, surgical. They didn't yell, not like before. They didn't need to. They just looked at me like I had betrayed them, like I had ruined something precious. "After everything we've done for you," my father said, shaking his head like I'd flushed his legacy down the toilet. My mother just sighed and muttered, "You're doing this for attention, aren't you?" That phrase followed me into adulthood like smoke clinging to clothes. Every time I flinched, every time I questioned a memory, every time someone raised their voice and I shrank. "You're exaggerating. You're too sensitive. You're making it up." It didn't matter how many nights I sat on the edge of my bed trying to quiet the screaming in my head. It didn't matter how real the flashbacks felt or how hard I tried to convince myself that I wasn't just playing victim. Because when your reality is denied often enough, it starts to feel like a lie even to you. None of the scratches showed up in photos. None of the bruises lasted long enough. And the ones on the inside, nobody saw them. Nobody ever did. I walked into the hospital with my face half hidden behind the collar of my coat and a carefully timed smile, like that would somehow make the swelling look like something else, like maybe people wouldn't notice the purple shadow blooming under my eye or the way my lip was split just enough to sting every time I tried to speak. The fluorescent lights made everything worse, too bright, too honest. They peeled away the lies I'd rehearsed in the car, over and over. I slipped on the ice. It was early, and the ground was slick. I lost my balance. End of story. No one really bought it. You can always tell when someone doesn't believe you. The way their eyes lingered just a second too long, or how their voice lowers like they're speaking to a feral animal that might bolt. Most of them didn't say anything, just nodded tightly and moved on. Too polite or too uncomfortable, or maybe just too busy to get involved. But Zoe did. She's new, maybe 23, still soft in that way you are when you haven't been hardened by years of watching people bleed out on stretchers or crumble in waiting rooms. She caught me in the staff lounge, alone, when I thought I'd finally made it through the gauntlet of pitying glances and forced small talk. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't touch me or lean in or try to decode the bruises with her eyes. She just looked at me like I was a human being and said, "Are you safe?" 3 words. That's all. And I nearly broke right there in front of the vending machines and the stale smell of burnt coffee. I didn't cry. I didn't answer. I just nodded, too fast, and mumbled something about being clumsy. How I always fall like this. Winter's a bitch, right? But her eyes didn't move. They stayed locked on mine, steady, kind, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who didn't need to know the full story to understand I wasn't okay. I went back to work. I drew blood, prepped meds, updated charts. My hand shook when I signed my name, but no one said anything. I wiped my face carefully with a tissue every time I passed a mirror, as if I could scrub the damage off before anyone else saw it. Between shifts, I checked my phone. Nothing. Not a single missed call. No voicemail. Not even a group chat message from the family. Just one text from my sister, plain and clinical as a diagnosis. "Don't start drama. You know what Lewis is like." That was it. No, are you all right? No, can I come over? No, I'm sorry this happened again. Just a warning. A dismissal. Like the silence that followed the shove and the kick was supposed to continue now, just dressed in digital form. Don't start drama. As if I was the one lighting matches instead of sitting in the ashes. It's a strange thing, realizing that strangers see you more clearly than the people who've known you your entire life. Zoe saw something in my face that my own blood refuses to acknowledge. And that silence, heavier than any punch, keeps ringing in my ears every time I try to forget. I started writing it all down because I was afraid I'd forget. Not the events themselves. They were burned into me like scars under skin, but the exact shape of them, the sequence, the patterns that never quite made sense when I tried to explain them out loud. At first, it was just a list. Date, location, what happened, who was there, what they said, if they said anything. I didn't call it a journal because that felt too soft, too sentimental. It was an inventory, an evidence log, a map of everything they made me carry. March 12th, 2001, pushed down the stairs after school, landed on my wrist, cried on the bathroom floor. Dad said, "Don't be dramatic, you're fine." August 30th, 1999, locked in the hall closet on my birthday because I wouldn't stop whining. I remember pressing my cheek against the hardwood and feeling the vibration of footsteps outside. I remember calling for my mom through the door. I remember her walking by without pausing. Not even a glance. I turned 8 that day. I don't remember a cake. April 17th, 2006, called it disgrace for getting into a college they didn't like. Told I was selfish, ungrateful, that I was embarrassing them in front of the neighbors. They'd been planning to tell people I got into their alma mater. I ruined it by choosing somewhere different. There were so many more. I started using codes. LR nose meant Lewis, refrigerator, knee to the nose. C8. MWalk meant closet, 8th birthday, mother walked by. I wrote them all in tiny, sharp print, like I was afraid someone might look over my shoulder and read it wrong, twist it back into something ugly and dishonest like they always did. But something happened the longer I kept going. The pages piled up, and I started seeing it differently. Not as random explosions of cruelty, not as isolated moments of bad luck, but as a system, a structure, something they had built together and learned how to maintain without ever having to speak about it directly. Silence was the foundation. Gaslighting was the insulation. Shame was the roof they kept over me. And underneath it all, there I was, not broken, not weak, not overreacting, just surviving. Every line I wrote down made that clearer. Every entry became a thread pulling the whole thing into view, like shaking dust off a sheet and realizing the shape underneath was a body, not a pile of nothing. For the first time, I saw it for what it was. Not my fault. Not imaginary. Not exaggerated. Real. Documented. Mine. I wasn't crazy. I was cataloging. I wasn't weak. I was remembering. And that was the beginning of something I didn't even have a word for yet. Not healing, not justice, just truth. Quiet, patient, and finally mine. I told myself it was just a quick visit. Drop off the groceries, nod politely, leave before the air got too heavy with old tension. I don't even know why I said yes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe some part of me still needed to prove I could handle it. That I was above the pettiness, the pain, the echoes that clung to those walls like mildew. I parked outside like I always had, second spot on the cracked driveway, just behind my father's aging truck. The house looked the same. Pale blue siding warped from weather, front steps sagging just enough to trip someone not paying attention. I had been paying attention my whole life. I knew exactly where not to step. Inside, the air hit me first, stale, too warm, like it hadn't been aired out in months. My father was in the recliner, TV blaring, same old game show reruns. He didn't look up when I came in, didn't pause, didn't speak. Just clicked the volume up one notch like I wasn't even there. My brother Louis was by the kitchen counter, chewing something with his mouth open, grinning like he'd already won. Back so soon? He asked, eyes flicking to the grocery bag in my hand. What did you forget, your dignity? My mother walked in from the laundry room, folded towel in hand, and gave me that look she'd perfected over the years, exasperated, disinterested, vaguely disgusted. You're lucky, she said, as if it were the most casual thing in the world, that Louis still puts up with you. Put up with me. Like I was gum stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Like I should be grateful he hadn't stomped me out completely. I didn't respond. I just set the bag on the counter and asked if I could go up to the attic. I don't even know why I asked. Habit, maybe. Even after everything, I still had the reflex of asking for permission in a house that had never granted me space, only tolerated my presence like a bad smell that wouldn't leave. The stairs creaked louder than I remembered. Dust hung thick in the attic like it was trying to smother the light that filtered through the narrow window. I stepped over boxes marked Zmaz and Louis school stuff until I found the crate I was looking for. The old photo albums, stacked in a plastic bin next to a pile of yellowed wrapping paper and unused birthday cards. The one I opened first was green leather, cracked along the spine, the kind with those sticky pages and cellophane overlays. I flipped through it slowly, like I was holding something sacred. Only I wasn't there. Photo after photo, family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, and the spaces where I should have been were just gone. Torn clean out, like someone had decided the past needed editing. In some shots, you could still see the edge of a sleeve, a lock of hair, a foot cut mid-stride. But the rest of me? Gone. Erased. There were whole pages where the outlines of the photos still showed on the adhesive, dust catching in the shape of something that used to be. I stared at one page for a long time. The caption under it said Allison's 5th birthday, but the space above it was just empty plastic and ghost glue. I ran my hand over it like maybe I could summon myself back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just indifference. They had tried to remove me from the story entirely. Like I never belonged. Like I was never wanted. Like I was never even there. And standing there in that cramped attic, surrounded by the shadows of a life that had been rewritten without me, I realized something colder than anything I'd felt before. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was that they wanted me gone. Not just from their house, not just from their present, but from their memory, from their narrative, from existence. They didn't just hurt me. They made sure there would be no record of me left behind. It was supposed to be another one of those so-called reconciliation dinners, where the table was dressed up to look like a family, but everything underneath it was sour and heavy and cracked. They invited me like they always did, like a formality, like a dare, and I showed up because part of me still hadn't killed the hope that maybe they'd see me, really see me, just once. Maybe they'd say something that sounded like regret. Maybe they'd remember I used to belong there. The kitchen was loud with clinking plates and forced laughter. My mother was barking instructions. Louis stood near the stove, too close to the kettle, tapping his fingers against the handle like he was bored with the world. I was seated at the corner of the table, just behind him, not even speaking, just trying to stay out of the way, trying not to shrink even though every second in that house made my skin feel too tight. Then it happened, so fast I couldn't even process it. He turned, carelessly, like I wasn't even there, and his elbow caught the kettle. It tipped. I remember the way the steam curled first, like a warning, and then the water, scalding, hissing, landed across my thigh and hand. The pain hit in two waves. First the white-hot sting, then the searing disbelief. I I screamed. Of course I screamed. My body jolted out of instinct, and I knocked over a chair trying to get up. My leg felt like it was on fire, the skin already puckering and going red. But before I could even speak, before I could get the words out, my mother snapped. It's your own fault for sitting so close. That was her first response. Not concern, not horror, just blame. Just the same cold, weaponized indifference she'd always worn like perfume. I clutched my thigh, hand trembling, and looked at Lewis, who shrugged like it was nothing, like he'd dropped a spoon. Should have been watching where you were sitting, he muttered, already moving on, already refocusing on his phone like I wasn't twitching in agony beside him. But the worst part, the part that cut deeper than the burn, was Lily. She had been at the table, quiet like she always was lately, playing with her napkin and avoiding eye contact. The moment the kettle spilled and my voice filled the room, she flinched hard, not at the sound, but at the reaction. She looked from me to her grandmother, to Lewis, and then slowly got up from her chair and walked out of the room without a word. It wasn't the exit of a child who was scared. It was the exit of someone who had already learned that fear gets you nowhere in that house. I followed her later, after I had bandaged my leg with the gauze I brought myself. No one offered, no one cared. I found her in the hallway, curled up on the bench by the window, hugging her knees like she was trying to disappear. When I asked her if she was okay, she didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, eyes too old for her face, and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Grandma said I was being dramatic again." Then, after a pause, she added, "Just like you." That hit harder than anything Lewis had ever thrown at me. That phrase, dramatic, like Allison, used like a stain, a warning label. Like being like me was the worst thing a girl could be. And there it was. The cycle, turning over again, smooth and merciless. A new generation, a new target, same script. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the walls apart. But all I could do was sit next to her, gently, and press my burned hand into hers. I didn't say it would be okay. I didn't lie to her. I just sat there, because I knew exactly what it felt like to have the fire on your skin and your family pretend you lit the match yourself. I didn't plan to speak that day. I hadn't even meant to attend the school meeting. Just drop Lily off, smile politely, and disappear before anyone asked too many questions. But then the email came about the behavioral review panel, about a pattern of emotional disruption linked to my niece. I read it twice, then again, the language so sterile it might as well have been written by a machine. They weren't talking about a child in pain. They were talking about a problem to be managed. I showed up in the second row, holding a flash drive in my hand like it was a weapon. And in a way, it was. A week earlier, Lily had left her tablet recording by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe some part of her wanted someone to hear what happened when the front door closed and the masks came off. On it, my mother's voice, sharp, cold, precise. "You're acting like a brat again. Maybe if you weren't so dramatic, people would like you more. Stop crying. God, you sound just like Allison." A long pause. Then a door slamming, Lily sobbing, muffled footsteps as she tried to hide the sound of herself. I waited until the floor opened for comments. My hands were shaking. My leg bounced beneath the fold-out chair. The administrator called my name, surprised to see me on the list. I walked up, plugged the flash drive into the laptop without a word, and pressed play. At first, no one moved. The room was filled with the usual rustling, parents adjusting jackets, papers being flipped, someone coughing in the back. Then the audio started. My mother's voice filled the speakers, unmistakable in its cruelty. The casual violence of it. The edge of something rotten that no one in that room could pretend not to hear. The room went still. Every cough stopped. Every eye turned toward the sound. When Lily's crying came through, small, broken, impossible to mistake, a woman in the back covered her mouth. I watched the blood drain from the principal's face. The counselor looked down at the table like she wanted to disappear. I let it play to the end. Then I stepped back. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The silence said everything. And then, from the other end of the room, someone stood. Ms. Carmichael, Lily's homeroom teacher, neat bun, nerves of steel. "I also filed a complaint," she said, voice trembling, but clear. "Last month. About her grandmother's behavior at pickup. I wasn't taken seriously." More silence. Then a man stood. Another teacher. "I saw bruises once," he said, eyes burning. When I asked Lily about them, she said she fell while cleaning. She's 8. What is she cleaning? One by one, people stood. A cafeteria worker. A parent who volunteered on field days. A substitute who'd only been there once, but remembered how quiet Lily was. Like she was afraid of her own breath. Every voice built on the one before it, a wave cresting, rising, refusing to crash back into silence. For the first time, the truth wasn't just mine. It wasn't just in my notebook or buried under years of doubt and denial. It was out there, in the air, in the room, in the eyes of people who finally saw it. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared to believe for years. They couldn't unhear it. They couldn't shove it back into a closet or tape over it in a photo album. The silence had broken, and the sound of that truth, jagged, imperfect, undeniable, filled every inch of the room. I should have known he wouldn't go quietly. My father was never the shouting type, not the kind to throw things or raise fists. His violence was paper-thin and precise, the sort that looked official even when it was rotten. So when the hearing reached its peak, when every voice in the room had cracked the dam wide open, he stood with that same false dignity he always wore at funerals and job interviews, holding a manila folder like it was holy writ. He cleared his throat, looked around as if the room still belonged to him, and said, "Before this hysteria goes any further, I have something to submit." His voice was steady, measured, the way it always was when he thought he could outmaneuver the truth. "This document," he continued, holding it up for the board, "details my daughter's long history of mental illness. Psychotic episodes, delusions, unstable behavior. It's been going on for years. I have the papers right here from her psychiatric evaluations." The words hung there, slick and poisonous. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I didn't even look at him. I just watched the board, watched their expressions begin to twist, not with confusion, but with contempt. Because right then, someone stood up in the back of the room. Dr. Jensen, the hospital physician, the one who saw me after Lewis split my nose, who examined the burns on my thigh after the kettle. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping forward, voice loud enough to reach every corner of the room. "But that's a forgery." Everything stopped. You could feel the moment it shifted, like gravity tilting. "I'm the physician listed on that form," he said, holding up his badge for the board to see. "And I never wrote it. Allison Bryant was not evaluated for psychiatric conditions. She was seen for repeated instances of physical trauma. Documented, photographed, reported. Her file is sealed because of the nature of the abuse, not because of anything psychiatric." My father's face tightened, but he said nothing. My mother reached for his arm, whispering something sharp and low, but it was too late. Two officers who had been posted quietly near the entrance moved forward, calm, steady, rehearsed. No cuffs, not yet, just the firm touch on the shoulder that said, "It's over. You're not in charge anymore." I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. I already knew what they looked like when they left a room they thought they owned. Instead, I stepped back toward the podium, slow and silent, reached into my bag, and pulled out Lily's plastic cup, the one she always drank from when she was little, the one with the faded cartoon animals and the thin fracture running from the rim to the base, sealed with clear tape. I set it down in front of the microphone without a word. Let them see it. A child's cup, cracked, but still standing. That was my trust. My childhood. Her childhood. Broken, yes, but not destroyed. We had both lived through it. And now, finally, it was not the end. It wasn't silence. It wasn't gaslight. It wasn't the erasure that my parents had tried to smear across every inch of our lives. It was the beginning. The first real one I'd ever had. They placed Lily in a shelter the same night my parents were taken away. It was procedure, they said, temporary, standard, nothing to worry about. But I worried. I worried in a way that clawed at my ribs and made sleep impossible. Because I knew what temporary could turn into. I knew how many kids slipped through cracks they never asked to be born into. I knew how it felt to wait for someone to come get you and realize, finally, that no one was coming. I filed the custody petition the next morning. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Just paperwork, signatures, affidavits. The weight of a lifetime condensed into manila folders and notarized declarations. I told the caseworker everything. The bruises, the recordings, the school testimonies, the attic, the burns. I gave them the inventory I had once made for myself. The map of pain I'd carried for years. And now, for the first time, it had a purpose beyond survival. It took days. Meetings. Inspections. Background checks. I opened every cabinet in my apartment, every drawer. I answered questions I didn't even know people were allowed to ask. And then, finally, I was called into a conference room where a woman in a gray cardigan and kind eyes looked at me and said softly, "She won't have to go back to them anymore." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. It was something deeper than tears, a stillness I hadn't known my body could carry. I thanked her, nodded, and walked out with a single folded document in my hand that said what no one had ever said for me. She is safe now. That night, Lily stepped into my apartment for the first time. She was holding a trash bag of her clothes and a backpack with a broken zipper. She didn't say much, just looked around the living room like it might disappear if she stared too hard. I showed her the bedroom I'd set up, the soft blanket, the nightlight, the books arranged neatly on a shelf. She stood in the doorway, uncertain, until I walked over and placed something gently in her hands. A cup. Pink. Smooth. Whole. Not chipped. Not cracked. Not taped back together like mine. This one's yours, I said. Only yours. She looked down at it, then at me, and for the first time in weeks, she let her shoulders drop. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. And that night, as she curled up under the blanket and I sat just outside her door with my back against the wall, I listened. Not for footsteps or yelling or slammed doors, just for the sound of her breathing, soft and even, a rhythm I could finally trust. There were two of us now. One cracked, one whole, both free. I stood behind the podium with my hands resting on the edge of the wood, palms open, visible. In front of me were rows of strangers, officials, reporters, and somewhere in the back, maybe behind the cameras, maybe in silence, were girls like me, waiting to hear someone name the thing they were never allowed to speak. I took a slow breath and looked at the table beside me, where I had placed the archive. It wasn't dramatic. Just a box. Worn. Unlabeled. Inside were photos, letters, medical records, dates scrawled in a child's handwriting, scans of bruises never explained, printouts of hospital visits no one ever followed up on. A childhood rebuilt from fragments they tried to erase. I had kept it hidden for so long, folded in closets and tucked behind bookshelves like something shameful. But now it was out in the light. I opened my mouth, and the voice that came out didn't shake. My name is Allison Bryant. I'm not silent anymore. The room didn't move. No coughs. No shuffling. Just the weight of listening, thick and real. I was told to keep quiet. I said, each word deliberate, not bitter, just carved from a place I'd lived for too long. I was told I was dramatic, that I made things up, that I asked for it. I was 8 when they locked me in a closet. I was 17 when they told me I was an embarrassment. I was 30 when they called me mentally ill for telling the truth. But this isn't about revenge. This is about making sure no one else grows up thinking silence is safety. I looked down for a second, then back at them. Because someone always knows. Someone always sees. And if even one of you has looked the other way, I need you to understand. Your silence was never neutral. It was permission. When the hearing ended, people clapped. Not loud. Not the way they do at graduations or rallies. It was slower, heavier. Like grief and relief folding into each other. Later, a journalist caught me near the exit. She had a notepad, but she didn't write anything down at first. She just asked, why now? I thought about it. I could have said because of Lily. Because of the broken cup. Because of the attic. But instead, I said the truth. Because for the first time, I replied, someone asked how I was. And it wasn't about me anymore. I started working with shelters, speaking in schools, sitting with girls who flinched at praise because it always came with conditions. I taught them how to document, how to name things, how to build a record even when no one believed them yet. I gave them notebooks. I gave them time. I gave them permission to exist. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't broken. I was a witness. A voice. And no one could tear that page out of the album again. Not now. So tell me, what would you have done? If you'd heard a child crying behind a door, would you have opened it? If you knew someone was hurting, but it was easier to pretend otherwise, would you still look away? Because someone is watching you now. Someone is listening. Just like I once was. And they need you to speak. Or get out of the way.